Beyond.
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 We're back.
Yeah.
Beyond.
What's the name of the show? Is it Beyond? I think it's Beyond. Welcome
Beyond.
to Beyond, episode 545. My name is Max Scoville, and I'm joined today by Brian Altano and Barrett Courtney.
Poop to scoop a whoop.
Oh man.
Wow. Wow,
Soup
yeah.
like Kanye.
I don't know how we're this energetic,
Yeah.
but we are.
We are.
And
We're
there's
in it.
there is some stuff to talk about. There's some very cool stuff going on. We are getting very, very close to E3. There's a lot of huge stuff on the way, which is good to get excited about because it's fun to remember that half of the games that are coming out this year we may or may not know about already. So
The cool thing is we're getting announcements and not just leaks.
yes,
different this
yeah,
year.
they're like controlled leaks. They're like a
Yes.
good steady stream.
That's gross.
Yeah, sorry. So like right off the bat, I want to talk about this. Bethesda is teasing something that looks very, very Fallout related. And they put up the Fallout test pattern that said please stand by, and the internet crapped its pants with excitement. And we don't really know what's going on. So.
Yeah, I've seen that like in a million cartoons growing up. I never really knew what it was called. It used to be it would have like a native, and then it would just be like this like blaring noise. But it's a circle with some numbers in the corner, and it's like when
It's
something
like a more professional replacement of like the color bars.
color bars.
on-
It's when something
Well, it was
broke
what
on
predated
TV.
the
Yeah.
color bars. But I mean,
okay.
that used to be, I mean, this is crazy to think about in this age of 24/7 streaming everything. But there was a point in time where TV would just turn off and there would be no TV for the end of the day. And
Yeah.
it would just
No
show.
TV.
Now
Yeah.
it just says the media cannot be displayed.
Exactly, yeah, in
Which
your
is way
in your
less
area.
cool.
But yeah, this is interesting. I think we're all sort of expecting. I think we're all expecting more Elder Scrolls because it's been a minute since we got one of those. And Fallout 4 came out 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
2 was
It
it?
was 20.
Yeah.
Oh,
2016,
might have been 2015.
I think it was 2015.
2015. Okay, so I don't know what year it is, but anyway.
Yeah, because it came out the same year as Undertale, and I was going
Right.
back and forth.
Well, the year that it is it is the 10th year anniversary of Fallout 3. So there's a possibility we get a remaster of that. There could also be Fallout 3 on Switch or Fallout 4 on Switch, or I don't know, Skyrim remastered on Switch, or I don't know. Like they put Skyrim on every possible device last year, and everyone made fun of them for it, but it apparently did really well. So maybe they'll do the same with Fallout. Who knows?
Quick PSA, if you're itching to play an old game with 3 in the title and you bought the season pass for Far Cry 5, you can now play Far Cry 3 as of today.
I
love
never
that.
played Far Cry 3. So.
Really?
Oh,
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's hands down my favorite.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't
really
put
good.
nearly enough time into it as I should have, but I think I'm gonna jump back.
I hear
Yeah.
Voss is a really cool.
Anyway, back to Fallout.
Oh, okay.
We're
PSA.
talking about. Thank
don't
you.
like
It's also possible that this is something like Fallout Shelter 2 or Fallout Shelter on Switch, or it's also entirely possible, given that the Vault Boy has kind of become a de facto mascot for Bethesda, that they just use the graphics to package their show, like to announce their whole E3 live.
I think the Vault Boy itself, if it was just Vault Boy there, I think that would be like a sort of all right answer. But since you've got the like please stand by thing, like they're going hard into like the Fallout stuff. But I would love if it was a switcheroo and
Yeah.
then they just announced Skyrim
I think
2
it was.
or something.
I think it was
right.
last year when they put out. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. They put out invitations that were like, "Oh, come to our theme park. Come to our Bethesda theme park." And it was like, "Oh, go on like the Doom roller coaster. Have some bloody cotton candy, courtesy of Prey or whatever the hell it was." And they had like a bunch of characters from their sort of iconic properties that they were using as sort of as mascots. So they really treat their E3 presentation as a celebration of all things Bethesda. So the fact that they're using some Fallout-ish imagery could be complete misdirection, or just, I don't know, enjoying that sweet aesthetic. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping we find out more before E3, whether that's a controlled leak or a steady stream or just an actual leak, however you want to describe it in
Gross.
relation to the urine.
yeah, good old urine. Anyway,
You're in for a treat this E3
Yeah.
at Bethesda's live show.
oh, good lord. So Mega Man 11 is coming out in October. It's actually Mega Man. It's not like Mighty Number 9 or anything like that.
So happy about this.
It's got some Mighty Number 9 sort of aesthetics.
I would say that Mighty
shut
Number
your-
9 had some Mega Man aesthetics, but
Okay, but I'm saying like because before Mighty Number 9, did Mega Man do a lot of the 2.5D stuff?
There was a chibi Mega Man that kind of got into that a little bit.
Okay.
like a Mega Boy.
Yeah, and I guess you could argue that the Battle Network stuff is sort of 2.5D. Not necessarily, it's just got multiple planes. But this game looks fantastic. It took me, weirdly, like 5 minutes to go like, oh man, it's not pixel art. That bums me out.
Yeah, that's...
But I actually really dig the art style. It's really vibrant. The animation's great. It also looks like the gameplay is incredibly down-to-earth, simplistic, based on the original Mega Man games. It's not too over the top, although like a lot of the sort of particle effects and graphics make it look like they're having a lot more fun with kind of creativity of like his powers and stuff.
Well,
but
so-
it's effectively an 8-bit game that looks like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
So I'm down with that.
It reminds me, like, it seems to have a good balance between, like, classic Mega Man of the sort of level design being a little more simplistic, but also having the energy of, like, the X series. In a way.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, these got a lot more kind of gauges and meters, which make me think more X, which is cool because I feel like I love the classic Mega Man aesthetic, but the Mega Man X is like in the 90s I was super into it.
So cool.
But sort of since then I'm like, just pump the brakes. Like you don't need to have like I mean maybe you guys should all chill Penguin a little bit, you know, like and I like that this is kind of a mix. Like he's got this sort of gauge above himself, which I don't.
Is it like a power gauge?
It's like a bullet time type of thing.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
But you can
Which is
use
cool.
it for other things as well.
I'm really curious to see how they kind of cherry pick what to update with this and what to leave alone because that's such a tricky balancing act with something like a classic platformer. Like how do you modernize it and add something that I mean look at like the recent Doom for instance.
Yep.
Like how do you make things more exciting or more accessible without either dumbing the game down or just having something that feels totally slapped together.
They added some really cool stuff to 9 and 10 for both hardcore gamers and a sort of much more casual audience. I believe 10 specifically had an easy mode where they put like basically barriers over all the pits so little kids could play.
I love that.
But they also added an endless mode, which crazy people could play, and I got really into. And I remember playing at the time, watching other people at IGN get like 100 levels deep, and it was basically randomly generated in terms of like the frequency that you interacted with a different tile set of rooms, and it was just really hard and really fun, and watching speedruns of that is great. So I hope they throw in some stuff like that. We don't really know much of that yet.
I love that the easy mode was basically just like bowling for kids.
Yeah, they put bumpers on the lanes.
It's really, I don't know, it's cute. It's nice. So anyway, Damon Hatfield has a good write-up about that. Ryan McCaffrey did a write-up on Octopath Traveler, which is the sort of 16-bit JRPG from Square Enix that they've been showing off for a while, so that's something to pay attention to. We are entering Days of Play 2018, which is, of course, Sony's big arbitrary summer promotional thing. And along with that, we are getting a brand new special edition PlayStation 4 that is blue, which I'm like looking at it, it seems like something, it looks like something that would only come out in Japan.
Yes.
It's cool.
I dig
guess.
the aesthetic for it, though. It's like
How many times have we said that word this episode?
I don't know, but the
that's like
millennials
7.
are all about
Yeah.
the aesthetic of
Hashtag aesthetic. But no, I don't know. I always love these sort of summer game events where they're just like, hey, like I know they're like we know you're not in school and probably phoning in at work, so it's nice out. Why don't you stay inside where it's cool and play the games? And of course, there's like a bunch of stuff is going on sale. I think they're like regular PS4s are getting a price drop, or not price drop, but discount or whatever. And there's some PSVR packages floating around. So.
What I like about what Sony does with some price drops is they'll be like, it's temporary, and then 2 months later they're like, it's permanent.
Yeah.
Just enjoy.
They're like pushover parents.
Yep.
They're like, you can have $10 for your allowance this week, but don't get used to it. We want you to get better grit. And then you're like, there, forget it. Also announced / revealed the new Lego game this year. Of course, we're getting a new Lego game. Is Lego DC Supervillains, which I feel like they've gone through every sort of possible iteration of this franchise. And been like, and I've been sort of whatever about it. I'm like, we've talked about this a bunch on Up at Noon with how basically with stuff like Marvel or DC, you've got this really deep bench of characters you can explore. But with something like Jurassic Park, you're like, and then there's
The
Dennis
Incredibles also?
Nedry. Incredibles is the same way, and I mean,
They added Jimmy Fallon to Jurassic Park.
exactly, yeah. And I'm sure Incredibles is gonna. I mean, I'm bummed that the Pixar or that Lego Incredibles isn't just like Lego Pixar the game, because I feel like
that
could
would be
be
cool.
you've got way more characters to pull from. But for whatever reason, they're not doing that. DC Supervillains, on the other hand, is a really fun idea
totally.
because it's all about. I mean, these games are always about sort of building stuff. I feel like this might be more an emphasis on destruction. So if you're running around as I don't know, like Big Barda or
Well, with
Joker,
with Batman alone,
Adam.
like the bench of Batman villains is hilarious. It's deep and it's weird. You have like Clock King, and then you've got like
And they've gone into
Mad
that
Hatter.
before in like the old Lego Batman games, right, where they would get really deep into some weird Batman villains.
I like that those guys have these like they have these very dad-like senses of humor where they're like, everyone's like, put Gwenpool in Lego game, and they're like, we put in Howard the Duck, and everyone's like, this is okay too. It's very I don't know, just it's very dorky and enthusiastic, and I really love it. So
the teams working on these games, like you really do get the feeling that they have like a genuine, deep appreciation for the subject matter that they're diving into. Like it doesn't feel like they're just grabbing licenses and cashing in on them. Like when they started doing like the Squirrel Girl mech suit stuff, you're like, oh, you guys really care.
Yeah.
Like you're really
you've lost your minds, but it's probably for the best.
And they have a justification for they're like, this was in one panel like 10 years ago, and when you're like, oh great, sure, whatever you got, man, throw it in there.
Yeah, I still can't believe they like Lego, not the TT Games or anybody, but they put out an actual Vincent Price mech suit as the Eggman from the Batman Lego movie. I'm like, in what universe is that like a good product for children?
Yeah.
They're like, kids really love Vincent Price these days. He makes sense, but whatever. It's Lego, it's Batman, it's silly, it's fun. Speaking of villains and whatnot, Killer 7 is coming to Steam. This was sort of beloved. Brian, you love this game, right?
So much. I think it was probably on this show or another show or every show I've mentioned that Killer 7 is one of my favorite games of all time. It was on GameCube and PS2 originally, developed by Suda51 and Grasshopper manufacturer, and it's just super stylish. It is a kind of like it's definitely on rails. It's sort of like a rail shooter, but incredibly story driven, hyper violent, really over the top. It's got branching paths and everything like that. It doesn't really play like something like House of the Dead because you can turn around and backtrack and do puzzles and open up in areas and stuff like that. But
It sounds kind of like Severed.
Kind of, yeah.
Like it's got a sort of dungeon crawler.
Yeah, that's actually, I never really put that together, but that's a good way of putting it. The art styles are kind of similar too.
Yeah.
And you effectively play between 7 different deranged personalities in one guy's head. And it's fantastic. It's like political and completely over the top. We haven't seen this game in a very long time. It was on PS2 and GameCube and then just vanished. And over the weekend, Suda51 at MomoCon announced that he's remaking it for Steam.
But hey,
our
don't
favorite.
Yeah.
I mean,
platform.
that's frequently sort of almost a test bed for getting other stuff poured over.
And,
maybe.
and NISA is the team developing it, which a lot of people were kind of upset about because their track records kind of all over the place. But the thing that got me excited, like this kind of sucked for me because I was like, oh, they're remaking porting one of my favorite games of all time, but it's not on consoles and it's not on PS4, and I want to play this like on in 4K. Like I want this, give this the treatment. So
I mean, that is definitely aesthetic. The graphics of that game, because they're cell shaded, they do scale really well. We've seen that like across the board. We've seen that with like Jet Set Radio, with Wind Waker. Cell shaded games, if they have solid art direction, typically they up-res really well. Whereas
more on aesthetic. Does the aesthetic change?
You need to cool it over there.
That's it.
With the different personalities and stuff? Okay.
Well, no, not necessarily, but every single personality had their own play style and like weapons, and some of them used guns and some of them used like katanas. And
It sounds like a game my mom probably didn't let me play when it came out, so I'm not familiar with it.
It was the kind of thing where like the game is awesome, but there's this tremendously deep well of like fan community theories around how the story unfolded. It's very very nebulous. It's also kind of Tarantino inspired, and like it's just got a lot of funk to it. Like the soundtrack is awesome. I just really dig this game. It's really, really cool. When you beat the game, it unlocks a whole new mode and gives you a reason to play through it again. So I hope this comes to PS4. I really, really do. And I think what you said, Max, is totally true. They would have to update the HUD and some other elements around, because like when you see HD remakes of things, you forget how many JPEGs are actually in there and how terribly those scale. So yeah, I don't know. Fingers crossed. This is my favorite Suda51 game. I think if this happens, maybe it'll lead the way for getting some ports of the No More Heroes games and some other stuff. So
I mean, with that stuff, it's curious. I mean, with Super Killer 7, it wasn't like motion controls or anything. It was made for a PS2 controller, which is effectively a PS4 controller. So actually porting that over isn't too bad. Whereas No More Heroes was made initially for a Wiimote, and then they managed to port that. They did the was it No More Heroes like 1 and 2 collection or whatever for PS3, where
I forget the name of the collection.
It was like Travis
Must Die or something.
like that. Yeah, it was weird. But I picked that up a couple months ago and was playing it for a second, and then I loaned my PS3 to somebody. But like that was funny because all the stuff that you were supposed to do with the Wiimote, just you had to do a gesture. Yeah, I think they made it. They mapped it to like one of the joysticks that you just wiggle or something.
For the audio listeners, we
made a gesture.
We just
a rude
movements.
A rude gesture with our
did
hands.
Some sweet air JOs.
Now, one thing that came out recently is we finally got Dark Souls Remastered.
Yep.
And by we, I mean PS4 owners, not Switch owners. Sorry, fellas, you got to hang out.
Aww.
fellas and ladies, whatever.
You have to wait even longer to play that very old game.
Yeah.
Did they say when it's coming out on Switch, or is it just
I don't think they gave a defined release.
No,
date,
they've
but
kicked it down the road.
Yeah.
I heard a whole container of those little amiibo got lost at sea, and they have to make more of. That's probably not true. No, so yeah, Dark Souls Remastered. Obviously, this is a game that people adore and love, but it's also a series that is very iterative, and they always do little tiny tweaks here and there to kind of, either improve or build upon what's at play there.
Yeah.
So there's always that issue with going back to remastered stuff. How does the core gameplay actually hold up if the visuals are the focus?
Yeah. And I can report after playing it a lot of this weekend is that it's still really awesome. And it still has that, like, so I'll put it this way. Let me to give you a brief like rundown of my history with these games. I only sort of dabbled in the Dark Souls and Demon Souls games until Bloodborne came out, and then I went all in and I fell in love with it. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know about my history with that game and how it's probably my favorite PlayStation exclusive, if not one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. Oh, wow. Bloodborne is just a fantastic game. I love it so much. I feel like the sense of discovery in that game is kind of unbridled. Turning a corner in that game is constantly terrifying, and until the point where you do get the confidence to feel good, and even then, anything can kill you. So going back to Dark Souls, where it kind of all started, and I'll say that since then I've also played stuff like Neo. I also played what was the other one? That weird Fallout mech suit one.
I can't remember. I just watched this. What the hell's it called?
John Ryan plays next to my desk
I've been
all
trying to
the
remember.
time.
This is so annoying. Was it Focus Interactive put it out? I think. It's like augmented or something.
Yeah, it's called
It's like it's Bloodborne with mech suits.
Anyway,
It's like,
we're all idiots. We can't remember. You're probably hammering away in the comments right now. It happens. So I went back to Dark Souls this weekend, and I was
The Surge.
Not
augmented at all.
Yeah.
Samsonite.
I'm sorry. I've been kicking myself trying to remember that. I just watched this Netflix show Dark, and it shows up in one scene where these kids are playing it, and I've been literally spending the last week being like, "Who's the name of it?" without actually looking it up.
It's also named after your third favorite soda.
Yeah. The Surge. Anyway, back to Dark Souls.
So Dark Souls, I will say this is a remastered video game. If you're expecting a remaster on the level of something like Shadow of the Colossus, don't. It's not. This is not like. I'll be completely honest. Like, I'm a little disappointed with the texture work in this game in 2018, and especially in terms of seeing like the Last of Us remastered, which obviously a newer game, or like I just said, Shadow of the Colossus, a couple games like that, I think do a much, even something like Wind Waker HD, I think do a much better job of bringing a game like this up to speed. If you're watching the video right now, we're mostly showing you cutscenes. When you're actually out and about in the game, the shadows are pretty rudimentary. The lighting is kind of flat.
Well, the souls are supposed to be dark.
They are. That's true. Praise the sun.
No, you're playing this on a PS4 Pro.
I'm playing on a PS4 Pro
and a 4K TV.
Yeah, and so the cool thing is that the frame rate is awesome. But like I'll be completely honest with you. Like, the gameplay in this game is great. Like, it's really, really great. And if you've played Dark Souls before, you know what you're getting into. You probably don't need another excuse to double dip on this game. Do it anyway. But if you've never played this game and you're like me, where you kind of dabbled in it and then maybe died in a boss and then went and played Bloodborne and got really into that, I know that's a very select focus group. But I just want to say that this is a really fun game to return to, especially coming off of like Bloodborne, because it shares so much of its DNA with that game. And it's got a lot of the same sort of mystery and sort of being intentionally over obtuse. Like, the systems are kind of not exactly pragmatic. It's kind of confusing, it outright pushes you away in a lot of ways, but it's got that same constant perpetual, push and pull of, can I carry these souls back to my fire, or should I risk it and kill one more guy? When I turn the corner, will this thing kill me? Like, I approached an area yesterday that I'd forgotten about, which is just called the Valley of the Drakes. And it's just like, something like that. And it's just like this dark, cavernous area full of blue dragons. And they're all perched and they're all walking. And I'm like, I'm going to tiptoe past them. And they immediately notice me and start attacking me. And I run full speed. And there's a giant dragon asleep on a cliff. And I'm like, oh, he's definitely dead. There was all these souls next to him. And I walk by him, and of course, he wakes up and starts going nuts on me. And now, if you've played this game, I'm just describing cool parts of it. But if you haven't, this game just has so much surprise and so much delight. And I think I've been looking for something kind of grindy to play. And I've kind of exhausted Bloodborne. I beat all the DLC. I beat the game twice on New Game Plus and everything. And I was looking for something to jump back into. And I really like this game. It's slower. It's more little more kind of methodical. It's a lot more about shielding and parrying and rolling away from your opposition. I feel like Bloodborne's a lot more quicker, more action based.
See, that's what really appeals to me. I know that it's such a scrub question, but like, is it easier or harder? You know, like what is it? But since actually kind of sinking my teeth into Bloodborne and understanding that feedback loop and that grindy hook, I'm still fighting that blood-starved beast. Is that the first one? No. Which is the one with the skin hanging off in the church?
Oh yeah, he's awful.
Is that that one? I don't know. I'm stuck on a boss, which is
you beat Father Gascoigne or whatever.
Yeah, I'm
proud of you, man.
Yeah, I'm very bad at the game, but I still like it, so I don't know what to tell you. But I'm curious, obviously, to find something else that I can sort of brute force my way into. It sounds like maybe Dark Souls would be better for me.
I think so. Honestly, from the way I've heard it described from people is that this game's actually a little bit easier, or possibly a little easier to grind. Now, I made the mistake. Like, here's the thing about these games: like, it's all about your build. And so the game starts off, you pick a class, and then from there you also pick a gift. And the gift is like this thing you start the game with. A lot of people pick the master key, which lets you open like pretty much any door in the game. It sort of breaks the sequence, but on your first time playing, it also gives you, some items that you may not have had before. And then from there, you have to basically decide how you want to build your character. And the first 20 or so levels are pretty easy to build up. You beat guys, you bring the souls back to your fire, and then you level them up. I'm sorry if I've played this game a million times and just sort of over-explaining it for people, for the uninformed, because I always try to assume...
They remastered it. What do you want?
I assume that people
and this is fascinating for me because I've never played any of these games.
And so I think that like coming into this game for the first time, I will report it totally holds up. It's totally a brilliant RPG.
So it doesn't feel like 2010 play mechanics? Or
not
anything?
at all.
I saw some feedback that the frame rate is actually rock solid in this version, which wasn't the case last gen.
And apparently there's an area that ran really bad like the first time it came out. It apparently was a little better this time around.
I had this amazing moment playing over the weekend where I was fighting the first significant. This is the first boss in the game. If you're watching the video, he's in the dungeon, and he's kind of optional. You can jump on his head and knock out most of his health and go from there.
Gotcha.
But the second boss in the game is this like awful hairy-legged bridge minotaur, and I was fighting him and just slashing at him, and he killed me like 5 times in a row. And I ran back up there with like half my health, and I was like, I'm just gonna get cocky and see if I can force push this guy off a bridge. And so I kept fighting him, and he kept backing up and doing his god-awful swinging attack.
Yeah.
And he went to swing at me, and I hit him once in the knee, and his arms went up in the air, and he fell backwards off the bridge and died with like full health. And I dropped my controller and just screamed. I was like, yeah. I was so happy because I was like, okay, I could have grinded and worked up to like level 30 to fight this guy. And again, if you've played this game a bunch of times, you're probably like, he's easy, bro, get over it. I was super happy. This is just like one of those moments, and it empowered me to realize that I can push through this game. And it's got that same sort of level of like, I'm at this part in the game now where I have 5 different paths open to me, and I don't know where to look.
That sounds
And
fun.
in one area, there's a forest full of these awful like ice golems, and then there's like a basement full of these like needle-armed sirens who are killing me. Max, I think you'd be really into it because it gets into some of like the more darker kind of medieval kind of nightmarish Lord of the Rings stuff.
I mean, the whole thing is you're a tough sell on Western fantasy, whereas like Bloodborne grabbed you because it's much more of that sort of like arcane Castlevania aesthetic. There it is, aesthetic. Sorry, drink every time we say aesthetic. But no, Bloodborne is like, or Dark Souls is like. I remember when it kind of came out alongside Skyrim, and it was this kind of thing where like, oh, you're playing Skyrim? Pfft, whatever. We're playing Dark Souls, idiot. And I was like, oh, you can steal cheese wheels. But no, like I messed with Demon Souls for a second. And again, these are games that you have to learn how to play. And it's always framed as get good, which is different from learning how to do something. Getting good is, I mean, sure, you can be like, you're getting good at knowing things, but in reality,
it's more about like have patience.
Yeah, and it's a mixture of practice, but also kind of like educating yourself and being like, what the hell does this arbitrarily named item I found, like, what does that do for me?
That's the thing.
What should
like,
I be doing against these enemies?
I think the get good thing totally makes sense, but it's also like, it's a kind of thing you only have to do once. Like if you got pretty good enough, if you got good enough at Bloodborne to kill 1 or 2 bosses, then you're good enough to play this game. Like you got good already, or at least you got good enough. Like it's not something that resets for every Souls game.
I don't mind grinding, you know. Like, and I just kind of like exploring a new world, and you know, occasionally games do get to a point where they're like, you're not good enough to explore further, and you're kind of stuck at that point. And you know that can be frustrating, but that's sort of just part of the medium, you know. So
yeah, it's weird because I'm like, I don't know, I go to the gym a little bit more now, so I'm kind of okay with like
So you're getting good in real life, you know?
barely, but like, you know, I'm kind of getting better at like small incremental victories that take months. And so
Yeah, grinding.
Yeah, grinding.
There you go.
And so I think that happens here too. I've read from people who are really into these games that your favorite one of these games is always the one you play first. And luckily for me, that was really Bloodborne. But that said, like, this is going to be a great second or third, and I really want to go back and play all the other ones now. So, yeah, I'll keep you guys posted on my progress. You know, I have a baby on the way, so I don't know how much, like, of the screaming macabre I need in my home. But, like, yeah, as for now, if you haven't checked this game out for some ungod reason like I have, get in there and play.
Oh, I got a question. Can you pause it?
I've hit the home menu. I don't know if that kills me or not.
Because Bloodborne, you couldn't really pause.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I go to very safe places and hide, and then
Okay.
even then I'm like, I hear a noise in the other room, and I went to make an
run
iced
back.
coffee in the afternoon.
Yeah, you come back and there's 3 skeletons like kicking you in the balls.
I came back in, I was like spilling double espresso all over the floor. I'm like, I heard a man, he's trying to kill me. But yeah,
Oh man, cool. Well, I mean, I'm happy it's out there. I'm happy more people can get their hands
Yeah,
on this
for
and
sure.
play it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we get to find out, hopefully at E3, what the hell FromSoft is working on next.
Oh God,
the
man.
bloody pulley game.
Do you think it's going to be Bloodborne 2?
I'm gonna scream so loud from my home if that happens. I'm actually jealous. If you guys are at E3 and Bloodborne 2 is there and it's playable or whatever it is they're making, just take as much of it as you can. Steal the disc.
All right. Sweet. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to swap in Mark Medina to talk about Detroit Become Human, the latest Quantic Dream game, which has the androids in it. All right. Hang tight. I don't know which camera to look at.
Goodbye.
The robots.
Good. See you later.
And we're back, and we're joined once again by Mark Medina.
Hi, once again.
I mean, you've been on here before, haven't you?
Never.
Okay,
Never.
well, we're joined once by Mark Medina.
For the
Hi.
first time.
I don't know why I said once again.
I mean, beyond.
yeah, here we are. So, Mark, you and Barrett, you two all both played through Detroit Become Human this weekend.
We sure did.
This is, of course, the latest from the video game auteur David Cage and his friends at Quantic Dream, and they've been kind of chasing this, I guess, very Quantic Dream of making playable movies.
Yeah.
Yes.
They've been at this for ages, and I feel like every time they make one of these, they come a little bit closer, and it seems like Detroit is really kind of getting really close. It's getting
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's cool.
What'd you guys think of it?
It's good. It's one of those things, the more, like, I go back and forth on it because there were a lot of scenes where, like, there's a lot of tension and you're on the edge of your seat and you want, like, these, you get connected with these characters, at least I did, where you want them to get through and succeed at whatever they're doing. And it's one of those things where, but then, like, it would be followed up with scenes that, like, were fine and a little ham-fisted and where the dialogue's bad and you know, they're really comparing this this light spoilers just because, you know, like, they've shown this in preview coverage of, like, there's a robot revolution going on and you know, there's some stuff there that, like, they really draw to real life history stuff, which gets a little, like, I don't know how I feel about that, but but for the most part, I thought it was, like, fun. I liked the characters and the relationships that they built.
Yeah.
Which I think was the main takeaway.
Well, you said something very key there. I think is that you let yourself get into it.
Yeah.
I think you have to forgive some stuff in this game, and really
Exactly.
you'll get as much out of a David Cage game as you want to let yourself kind of believe it.
Yep.
So that's kind of piggybacking off what you said is, like, my favorite thing about the game was, like, the characters. The story I think it's good. You kind of see where it's going pretty early on, and it you know, no spoilers again, but it's like, you know, it is what it is. But I like the characters a lot, and that's kind of like every Quantic Dream game is, like, how good are the actual characters themselves, and, like, people like the characters in Heavy Rain. So if you like the characters in Detroit, then for the most part you're probably gonna like the game.
I played. I did a live stream with Casey DeFreitas here on IGN, and we played through the first 2 hours, and she hadn't touched it. And I'd, of course, done another live stream where I'd played through the demo, which is sort of the first chapter.
Yep.
And I'd had to play through it 5 times, so I was just like, Casey, for the love of God, just like speed run through this,
Right.
get through it as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, I really like how much this game opens up.
Yeah.
And the fact that it shows you so much. Like there's sort of almost like a literal map of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is massive.
It's crazy how much it splinters off. It was one of those things, like, I've never played a Quantic Dream game before this, and the only exposure I've never played, like, I didn't own a PS3, so I didn't play Heavy Rain. Or I heard a lot of like the like reactions of Beyond Two Souls.
I like Beyond Two Souls.
I'm actually pretty fond of that one too. I think the thing with these games though is that the newest one is sort of always the best, and then there's this almost sort of fickle turnaround where, you know, in hindsight, it's sort of like, oh, that's really corny. Like when Heavy Rain came out, everyone was losing their mind over it. And then a few months later, everyone's like, nah, it's actually really corny. And then Beyond came out, and everyone's like, I think that one came out at a weird spot where people were sort of kind of lukewarm about it, and then sort of actually kind of pleasantly surprised. And I think with this one, people are like, hey, they're kind of actually sort of pulling it off, but I can very much see the sort of think pieces coming out.
The closest I got to this before this game was Until Dawn, and I feel like the sort of splintering off Until Dawn does is really only really about how long will these characters sort of live. Whereas like if you get all of, like they've said before, like the three main characters, like androids can die and other people can die, and that can really affect. But even if you keep them alive, there's still a bunch of different storylines that you can splinter off into and all this stuff. So that's what I find fascinating.
There's a really funny thing. Until Dawn is a great example because I feel like that's sort of an honorary Quantic Dream game.
Yeah, it's kind of better than most Quantic Dream games.
You know why I think because it sets out to make a campy slasher flick, and you're like, oh whoa, I actually sort of give a crap about these characters even though they're very corny. Whereas Quantic Dream is like, you need to care about these serious characters, and that sort of sets itself up for you to be like, oh well, come on, what are you doing here? You know, like it's very like, I mean, let's be realistic. Like Quantic Dream games are frequently kind of up their own ass. Like they're very and it also, especially in 2018, to be like, a very thinly veiled allegory for civil rights. It's like, why don't you just make a civil rights game?
Oh man, I forget. Like it's to the point where there's a certain scene where you can like sort of like it's all like the revolution stuff, and then you can like spray paint like slogans and stuff.
And
it's
there's
getting
actually
to the
like
point
MLK quotes
that
you can tag.
I forget if like maybe it's just like similar to stuff like
no,
like, I Have a
literally one of
Dream.
them is I have a dream or whatever. It's like you're just like Jesus Christ.
It's really thin at points, and it's like and like a lot of Marcus's stuff. Like Marcus is the sort of guy who is leading this revolution, whatever. Like it's weird because you go back to it. Like I liked his character and stuff, but like a lot of his story stuff, I felt like, oh, that's weird. That was a weird decision. Oh, they skipped a bunch of stuff that I would have liked to have seen and whatnot. It felt like his story out of everything felt a little weirdly paced for
Which
me.
is weird because he's like the main character.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I thought was interesting is we're finally at a point where these like performance capture performances are they're up to speed. Like it's like playing a movie, and it's incredible, and the visual fidelity is great. You don't have any of that weird sort of like PS3-ish artifacting where you're like, that looks like we have escaped the uncanny valley,
Or like the dead eyeballs.
exactly. And yet now he makes a game about androids. Like now David Cage is like, now that my people finally look like people, I shall focus on artificial people.
They're robots now.
And then you add to this by the fact that like Marcus plays an android who is the sort of the butler for a guy played by Lance Henriksen, who is mostly known for playing androids in the Aliens movies. Like he plays Bishop. His most famous role is an android. He looks, so you've got, it's just
So
like
in a game full of androids, he's the only non-android.
I mean, I feel like they might as.
Also, shout out to the guard from Shawshank Redemption, who's your buddy cop dude in Connor's story. I really love him. That's that's the really mean like guard. Yeah, Hank.
Isn't he?
Hank Anderson.
God, what's his name? He's Mr. Krabs, isn't he?
I think so.
Yeah,
I believe so.
I think he's the Kurgan from Highlander, and he's Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob.
He's also an Overwatch character.
Clancy Brown. Yeah,
he's also an Overwatch character.
Who was your favorite android? Just real quick.
I really love Connor.
Yeah,
Connor is like
Connor's
I really
great.
love his like him and like his relationship with Hank specifically, and like it felt like a sort of corny '80s buddy cop movie. Like it feels almost like not super RoboCop-y, but like sort of like in that territory. And it was just like I dig it. And then I liked Kara. My frustration, not to get like super into spoilers, but like I liked her journey the way, like the ending I got, the way that happened felt really off and weird, and it didn't like really fit to like what I had done in the past. So I don't know if that was just like maybe if I get a different ending with her, maybe I'll like her like storyline a little better. But yeah.
Well, the cool thing about this is the way they've sort of mapped out the different choices you make. It's much easier to kind of rewind and go back. Like, I mean, it's this huge, big sort of visual branching path, and to be like, oh, here, these are the key choices that affected these things. And we haven't had anything in a Quantic Dream game like this. Like at the end of every mission in Beyond Two Souls, it'll say like what percentage of people made the choices, and it's sort of transparent to be like, this many people didn't save the fish. And you're like, well, I wonder if I had saved the fish, if I would have a different end. You know, it's like, it's kind of
sure.
They do make you feel like, especially with Connor's stuff, like the little things that you do, they do make it feel like it's building up to something. Because like even just from the demo, like when you pick up the fish, and if you decide to save the fish, it's like it says in the top right corner, like, oh, like instability, like rising or whatever.
You're constantly getting like if you say something to Hank or something like that. It's funny. I'm watching my wife play through it right now, and she's constantly restarting chapters because like she'll say something that she thinks is fine, and it'll be like, Hank hated that, and she's like, no, like I want me and Hank to be friends. So then she'll restart the chapter.
I think my biggest problem with these games at this point is their length. And it's not that they're. It's not that I think that to have a compelling story, I wish that they were movie length. But instead, they're like season of a TV show length. Which
the whole draw for this one was supposed to be their 3 short stories weaved into each other.
He's done that all the time. Like I mean, like Beyond was sort of was vignette. It jumped around in time, and you could those were different periods. And then Heavy Rain was 4 different characters. And I would love it if we got something like a 4 rooms almost, where David Cage was like, here are 4 different 3-hour experiences, and when you say 3-hour experiences, they're really, really replayable. I'd rather have something that I want to replay, like something that's 2 or 3 hours long that I can replay 15 times, than something that's 10 hours long that I'll replay twice and maybe Google spoilers online. You know.
So, are you more of a fan of the Telltale games?
Well, I'm not. Because I feel like
because
they don't
like, even though they're episodic, it still builds up to be like
they're
8
still
hours.
pretty long.
Yeah, I don't like this sort of seasonal approach here.
I would have liked if it was like what you're saying, like the first playthrough is like 2-3 hours, and then if you want to get all the different endings, then it leads up to be like 10 hours or so.
Yeah.
Because like after my first playthrough, I'm pretty sure like the story I got was probably the longest the game could be.
Oh no!
And just because like, you know, I was really trying to like make sure that people lived as long as they could and all that stuff. So I feel like I probably unlocked all of the scenes you can.
Yeah.
But it was just long enough where I'm like, I don't feel like going back and getting like, I want to see what the different endings are, and that's why I love talking to people about this game, just because like, what did you get? Like, what did this person do with this scene and stuff? But like, I don't want to go back and like try to like get trophies for other scenes.
Well, something funny that we were talking about before we went on was I had one of my androids, I won't say who, I had one of them literally die in their like second scene,
which rules.
And yeah, it's really cool. But what sucks about it is, I probably played the game for another 4 hours or so before I realized this person's not coming back. It's pretty obvious who it probably is.
That's awesome.
Whatever. And so what happens is at the end, when you can look at all your flow charts, this person's just ends. And then you have... So I basically beat the game in one setting because I have now discovered that I cut out
really
about
only played
3 or 4 hours of the game.
So I had like a weird thing happen with, I think when I played Mass Effect 3, I didn't transfer my save from 2. It did that thing where at the beginning they're like, if you want to just not transfer saves, just
here's some quick choices.
Ask you the questions.
Yeah.
And whatever it was I answered, it was like it thought that I had a character from 1 who hadn't, like, there was a character from 1 who was hanging out with me, and I was like, I have no idea who this person is. And it was operating under the assumption that that person had lived through the beginning of 2 or whatever. And I was just like, who is that? So the idea that you can be like spoilers for a game like Detroit is really funny because it's so subjective. To be like, this character dies if you make this choice. You know, you don't know how it's going to go.
So that's what's hilarious. I beat the game I pretty much beat it in one sitting, and then now my wife is playing through it, and I'm like constantly getting spoiled because she's doing things I never did. She's seeing characters I never saw, and I'm like,
gotcha.
Yeah. But now if I want trophies, like you
back.
pretty much get a trophy for every time you complete a chapter. I essentially have to play the entire game again, because what it does is you can go back and play chapters, and it'll ask you, do you want this to be your new like save,
Main save,
basically?
yeah.
And so then what happens is you can't go back. Like let's say Connor dies or whatever. He keeps coming back. Don't worry about it. And you're like, oh, I don't want him to die. So I'm going to go back 3 chapters and fix that. It doesn't have a ripple effect. That is now your new save file. So you would have to play through scenarios.
Yeah.
So now if I want to beat the game with all 3 characters, I have to replay the entire game again.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean,
cause a ripple effect.
It does make. I think it's definitely easier than it ever has been to sort of go back and.
It's definitely
Yeah.
replayable.
Yeah.
Replayable.
Which is good.
Especially since when you go into a chapter, it even has it where you're like, okay, I want to do the Kara cleaning scene. You can choose where in that chapter you want to start.
But only specific points. I was getting really frustrated by that because like there weren't like a consistent amount of checkpoints in each scene.
Yeah,
I kept finding there was one particular scene that I was doing over and over again because I kept getting like 1 or 2 of like the sort of worst endings, and I was like, no, like there's got to be a way to like get sort of the good outcome from the scene, and I would always have to start like 10 minutes before like the big choice came.
Got it.
So I felt like that was a little frustrating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think people are sort of like, I think David Cage makes some really cool stuff. I don't know exactly how much of what. I mean, this is a similar thing you get with Kojima, where people are always like, this is the one person who made this game, but in reality, it's a huge team.
Yeah,
sort
it
of
says
under one
written
person.
and directed by David Cage.
Yeah,
but
and
it's like
how much of
they have
like
an X
how much
down
of
and all
the good mechanics were from his gameplay designers or whatever. So I think the guy at the very least facilitates some really cool stuff in games.
Sure.
I would love it if his tech was opened up to other creators. One of the sort of selling points of this game was that they hired 3 different directors of photography to create the different aesthetics for, there it is again, there's that word, the different sort of the different visual feel of the different characters games.
Yeah, Connor's scenes feel like
Yeah.
an action cop movie.
But
like
what if
Marcus feels like a sort of like weird indie revolution.
It's more, it's more like kind of like breathy in this sort of more fancy lighting. Yeah, but I would love it if we had, in addition to the different virtual cinematographers, we also had, I don't know, different writers and directors.
Yeah.
Because we do have different characters, and that would create this feeling of these intertwining narratives from different perspectives, as opposed to it all comes back from one guy's ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that Quantic Dream games are interesting. They're very, very interesting.
They're also not for everybody.
No, totally.
Like I'm seeing a lot of the comments, and a lot of people are talking about like how it's just a movie where you press buttons. It's like, I mean, some people like those.
They don't really,
but they're
deny
not
that.
They're not for everybody.
Yeah, but there's still like technically a gameplay mechanic in there of like the choice and sort of like what you want the story to play out as.
And because of the limitations of like, fighting, none of that's in there. It's not an open world. The game is gorgeous.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it is beautiful.
Yeah, it's fascinating. One thing I love is how they. I don't know if you call this the fourth wall. I don't know what it would be, but the fact that as an android, you play as different androids, and as these different androids, you have objectives within the world. Like in the story of the game, these androids have objectives that are not dissimilar to video game objectives.
Yeah.
So the idea that like, Marcus has to go and buy paint.
Yeah.
And that is your one objective. And this is sort of still in the tutorial-ish area.
Like in his mind UI, he's like, I got to walk this way.
And the way they explain invisible walls and not being able to go do whatever you want is that you're an android who has a job to do.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
And then at the same time,
really cool.
I think everything short of the different button cues they kind of make sense. Like maybe that's what the world looks like to androids. Like maybe they do have these weird like
sort of prompts of like,
well, they totally do, because I mean, this is very early in the game, but like one of the androids gets disassembled basically, and those HUD elements aren't there. So like he loses his like eye or whatever. So then when you push R2, there's nothing there.
I love that.
Until he gets his eye back, then the game kind of like shows you, hey, look, you can do this stuff again. So it's totally like that is what they see.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I find myself less interested in this than I was in terms of setting than I was in I think the last few games, because I loved Heavy Rain. And I was actually just
what are you talking about? Detroit's a great city.
Detroit's
Detroit.
I like
a city.
Kiss wrote a song about it. Yeah, you're gonna lose your mind in Detroit, become human. But no, I love that like we looked this up, but Heavy Rain is set. It's supposed to be set in like the very near distant future to when it came out, or not near distant, near future.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of stuff in there that seems a little bit too
near
high tech.
distant
The
future.
near distant.
Sorry.
That game came out in 2009, I think, and I think it's set in 2012.
Okay.
So it's currently set in the past, but it was the future of when it came out.
So it's like 2001: A Space Odyssey almost.
Sorta, yeah, a little bit different.
Because
like-
2001
it's like
is
That's
now
the
in the
year
past.
Shrek came out.
It's like 30 years.
But no, I mean, because of that, there's a lot of stuff that feels very grounded. Like the convenience store looks like a normal convenience store. It doesn't look like a hyper futuristic convenience store. Whereas in Detroit, it's do they
It
say
looks
what
like
year?
a
It's
clean convenience store though, and that's actually pretty futuristic. to me.
Exactly. But I mean, I think it's distracting because like the cars and stuff you see on the street in Detroit are like very like everything looks very video gamey, which almost distracts from how realistic it could look.
Yeah.
And I mean, as much as like that's the thing is in a video game for things to look streamlined and futuristic, it's almost sort of inherent to the medium because everything is made of polygons and pixels.
Right.
And whereas if you recreated or you created this futuristic version of Detroit in live action, I'd be really impressed because I'm like, holy crap, that guy's headlights up and those cars look so real. I can't believe they made those cars. But in a video game, I'm so used to it that if you made something that looked grounded and realistic in sort of a present day sense in a video game, I'd be like, oh wow, this feels very, very real. Like the stuff like I don't know, like a bedroom in Beyond Two Souls, or I mean, cleaning up your house in the beginning of Heavy Rain is so like I'm like, oh, this is like a real normal house. It's very grounded, and I don't see that a lot in video games. Whereas like futuristic cars is like I don't know, it's everywhere. It's super common.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm glad that we have Quantic Dream games. I'm glad they're around. I'm so excited to see what they do in the near distant future. You know?
Yeah, the near distant. One last question you sort of had here is, do androids get a pass for bad acting and writing?
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about this really quick. When it comes to writing, I don't think there's really any excuse for bad writing. If you're like writing for something that doesn't necessarily have a lot of emotions, you should still be able to like think inside the shoes of what that would be like and give interesting dialogue. Maybe like some of it can be cheesy from the perspective of like this is how I'm programmed, but some like they do that sometimes in Detroit and it feels like that feels like an excuse. There's a weird balance to it that you got to find. When it comes to the acting though, that's a tough one because you're supposed to be robotic and whatnot, and it's one of those things where like in Westworld you have here of like other examples like Westworld. I think they do it pretty well because those are supposed to be like androids that are programmed to sort of break the Turing test, or not is that the
the Turing test.
the Turing test and all that stuff. Like you're not supposed to think that they're androids and whatnot, and so like they get away with it because they can act like regular human beings with emotions and whatnot. And Blade Runner, I think, is a really like 2049 specifically. I think is a great example of how to play an android and be really interesting, especially like when Special Agent K is like checking in and like doing like the read back thing where he's like telling the code words and stuff, and he's like really stressed out like the second time he does it. You see of like the sort of weird like interaction of like android mind and also like emotions clashing at the same time, and it's really, really cool. So I think like it's one of those things. I don't know if it should be a good excuse for bad.
No,
Are you saying the acting's not good in the game? Or?
It's one of the like I think at times the delivery of a lot of lines feel awkward, and I think that's because a lot of like I think I've said this a lot of times. Like I think like a good 30% of the dialogue is sort of just bad. So I think there's like
you could also blame a lot of that on the medium itself and the fact that there's no if it's a movie that you're in control of, there's not really an editor in the conventional sense, and if there's story beats that seem awkward because the player is making idiotic decisions, you know, and I mean I think the performance is it is impressive that they are as good as they are, given that they were made by actors in like onesies covered in ping pong balls in a giant green room full of cameras.
When you look at these examples, it's like, oh, it's you're in Westworld, and it's like, yeah, but you are in Westworld. You're on the set. Where here you have dots all over your face, and you're opening a car door that is just made out of cardboard, and they're driving a car, and they're just
I
like,
can't imagine what it's like
in
to be
a
on
volume
the set.
that like it's, you know, it's,
because like prime example of like why you get some bad performances from great actors sometimes is like when they're just on like a blue screen, you know, like the Star Wars prequels, it's famous for that. Like they didn't have real sets, so it's like
know what they were interacting with.
So like I actually give people who regularly like do mocap for video games and give great performances like super props, because it's like you're not actually like in this environment, you're like you said, in this weird suit, and you've got to like pretend that you're actually in this moment.
Yeah, they have
whatnot,
to they have to act for the entire environment
Yeah.
until it can be, you know, comped in there by
Rendered.
It's like
digital artists.
next level imagination.
Yeah. No, I just think it's funny. I was watching Westworld this weekend and just sort of
How's that going for you, by the way?
I'm not having a great time with
Then
it, but I'm
stop
still
it.
I need to finish this season to
No,
find
you
out what
don't.
happens. I don't know. At this point, it's sort of
gave
like
up.
I love that first season. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah,
and then
me
I
too.
think that,
And then I dropped off the second
yeah,
season.
and then I don't know. There's like I
Because
like
season 1, I'm just going to give this hot take. Westworld season 1 ends very terribly. I think that ending is
well,
very
maybe
bad.
it shouldn't have had a
Westworld
season
cast.
2. I don't know. I would watch Ed Harris order a salad. So he could
True.
do literally anything, and I'd be like, "My God, this man is compelling." But the second you lose Anthony Hopkins, or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's whatever. I should probably cut that out. I guess I don't know.
Keep it.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins is gold. He's
Yeah.
Thor's dad.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird to
But
get
that's
a bunch
what he's
of
most
yeah.
famous for, not Hannibal Lecter. He's
Yeah.
Thor's dad.
Thor's dad.
Anyway, let's shift gears here and talk a little bit about what's coming out this week. There are a bunch of games coming out, and I didn't even have time to write down all of them. But one I want to touch on real quick is this game called Agony, which is, I don't even know who put this out, but it is
It's a game
it's a game. It's like a first-person survival horror
Yep.
set in hell.
in
I think?
hell. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mark, you
it's a-
played this
it's a yeah. I played it a little bit. So it's a 2016 Kickstarter game that got kickstarted. It's supposed to come out in March. It's finally coming out. I don't know when Podcast Beyond goes up, but it's probably out now. And the game is I don't know. I want to say it's your typical hell, where it's
Typical
just
hell.
like everything's really slimy and dark and red, and the creatures like.
Sounds
So
like
did
hell.
anybody play what's it Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice?
Yeah.
So
played,
like
like, a
it's
little bit of
kind of like that. Like you're walking and you can hear things whispering in your
Okay.
ear.
But it's not like you have one herb and 4 bullets. You've got to find a typewriter and kill Nemesis or what. It's not that kind of survival horror.
It doesn't seem very like. I think there's like literally one button for attacks.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Like and-
Weird.
So it's a little more walking sim in that sense?
Yeah, so it's like you're like walking, but then you possess other. You were dropped into hell. You have no memories of why you're there.
Probably because you were bad in real life.
Yeah.
Sure, and then you're going to the Red Goddess to try to get back into the world, and so you essentially like the very beginning of the game has you walk off a ledge and then you just die. But then you possess another like creature that was down there, and then you continue the game as him. And so it's kind of like a puzzle game. Then it's like you see a puzzle, and so like I was playing on a computer, and it literally wants you to draw stuff, but you don't know what to draw. So then you have to go and look for like different symbols, and then it'll be like, oh, draw like this, and then you go back. And my biggest issue with it so far is that it's very slow. It's a first person game. It doesn't. Really, the story just doesn't really make any sense at all. The game is super not pretty. It is super not good looking.
I'm
at all.
actually, I think the sort of the design of it is really interesting. It's very very Clive Barker. Like it's very like it's overly hellish. Like it's
Yeah.
I forget
it's
who
super
said this.
red and
It reminds me
lava.
of like, you know, like the metal scene in like mid 2000s of like, we're all hardcore and like,
Yeah,
just like that just
so
weird vibe.
I forget who said it. I want to say it was like Anthony Birch or Tim Rogers or somebody floating around games I follow on Twitter. But they were talking about Killing Floor, and they were like, "Hey, I just want you to take a minute and realize exactly how much talent it takes to make something look this intentionally ugly." And I think that totally
Killing
applies
Floor's
here.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. This game is agony. What do you want?
Yeah.
Yeah, and to give like more context, like if you've never heard of this game, it's supposed to be like it's just like really grotesque, and there's like just like a lot of like crazy violence and like gore and
So, like,
It's got like butt cheeks and like
butts and other
mandibles.
Well, and like
Yeah.
originally it got like an adults only rating, which they didn't want. So then, because then they basically just like it's really hard to sell.
Yeah.
So then they toned it down for a mature rating, and then they had this list and they put it up today, and it's like, here's all the stuff that's still in the game, and it's like all this like just like gross stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's really weird. And then just on the technical side, it seems kind of buggy still. It seems pretty early access,
Well, they might
which
patch
it's
it
not
in
supposed to be. Yeah, and then it's just like very dark.
Yeah.
Like I just can't see anything in the game.
Anyway, a few other things coming out this week. Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, which I completely somehow wasn't even paying attention to, but it's like 12 Street Fighter games, which is always
yes.
nice. If
I
you
can pay a good $60 to be bad at 12 games.
Yeah, that's a bargain, man. That's like $7 to suck at each one. I don't know math. There's also a Sega Genesis collection out this week that's like 50 games. So I don't know if you want to play Sega on your PlayStation. And have some kind of weird 90s fever dream. There you go. There's a game called Moonlighter that I've been hearing about for ages, which is like a roguelite RPG where you play as the sort of the stereotypical RPG shopkeeper, but it's your night job, which is, I believe, to go around and gather the gear that you're selling to the hero of the RPG. Which is just like, I love that. That sounds like such a game jam pitch. I have no idea if the game is good or not.
What if you played as the shopkeeper?
Yeah. No, I love. It's so funny. Like I love that. It's like I love when there's
Where
sort of
does
that.
he get all these potions?
Like it's just like weird meta kind of
You
stuff.
you play as a handgun pointed backwards, and you control a man who was walking behind you. You're like, whoa! It's the inverted first-person shooter, crazy. No, I love that kind of like game jam type of pitch, and I don't know. It's always funny when people actually try to deliver on it. So, also, if you are a PSVR owner, pay attention, take your hat off, and take a look because there's a bunch of PSVR games coming out this week. There's one called.
Oh God, no! I don't want to take.
Don't take your hat off. No, I meant the expensive VR hat. There's a game called Wraith, which is a bit like a survival kind of tactical shooting type game. Perfect Sniper. Guess what that's about?
You have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Play the perfect.
With a sword.
You never. Yeah. That would be really weird. Sniper with a sword. Black Hat Cooperative, which is like a hacky game. Along Together, which looks like a cute kind of I don't know adventure game, and then To the Top, which is something involving superheroes. Those are all floating around. We get this list every week of what's out on the PlayStation blog. The Drop, assembled by Ryan Clements, who used to be on this show millions of years ago.
Yeah.
And now he works at Sony. So
Before I was even born.
yeah, thousands and thousands of years ago, back when you were just a mere mud skipper crawling on the beach, growing your vestigial legs. This has been Beyond. Thank you all so much for joining us. Mark, Barrett, thank you for hanging out and talking games. And I'm sorry
having
that
us.
Brian had to leave, but he didn't play any Detroit, so he had nothing to say about those robots.
Yeah, no rule but talk for Brian Altano.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell we're doing in the next couple weeks aside from E3, but we'll be at E3. We'll be covering E3, so please stay tuned to IGN because we're all going to be very, very busy.
If I can put in a word, I think next week is going to be a big E3 predictions episode for PlayStation.
Man, I was hoping we could take a week off. I don't want to do that. Can we just do the one from last year?
We're probably going to be taking a week off the week of E3. So
They keep moving all the cameras. They come in here like, we need the cameras. Like, oh yeah, they don't have any of those in Los Angeles. Got to bring these San Franciscan cameras. They take artsier
I'm just
shots
going to
or
mention that you probably could use part of last year's episode. Like, man, Kingdom Hearts looks real good.
Yeah.
Unlocked is like, man, Crackdown 3.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Do like a roundup of exactly how wrong we were and how we're still waiting for those things.
yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, and you can find us all on Twitter. I'm Max Scoville. Mark, you're...
At Mark_Medina.
That's pretty simple. And Barrett?
At Sad Boy Barrett.
Sad Boy Barrett. What's wrong?
Just, I'm just that sad boy.
All right.
He's a little sad boy.
And there we almost made it a whole episode without you dabbing. Damn it, Barrett. All right. And a huge thanks to Dan Parkhurst for babysitting the control room while Barrett is in here talking about the computos.
Yeah, I usually produce this show.
Yeah, you do. You do a good job. Except when you put JPEGs in and frighten everybody. There's Dan.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Dan.
And big thanks to Brian. He's on Twitter, Agent Bizzle, but he has enough followers already. Don't follow him.
Or do.
And on that note, Beyond.
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 The end.